燃え上がれガンダム。Hello and welcome to Weekly Suit Gundam, a special bonus podcast brought to you by the folks at Japanimation Station. I'm Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are here once more. Rising from the abyss, beckoned by fate, Gundam has happened once more, and so we are here to talk about Gundam on the most weekly podcast on the internet, Weekly Suit Gundam, because that's right, the most recent Gundam series, Mobile Suit Gundam GQuuuuuX, has just finished, so we are here to talk all things GQuuuuuX. We, of course, talked about GQuuuuuX already in the movie form, so last episode we did was on GQuuuuuX Beginning, which was the movie compilation of kind of the first 3 episodes, but there's also half of episode 8, and it's a whole thing we'll get into. But we have talked about that on the podcast, but now we're here for the whole heaping helping of GQuuuuuX to discuss here today, Jonathan.
Heaping helping, although compared to other Gundam series, not as heaping, because this is by far the shortest Gundam TV series ever broadcast.
It's heaping in density, if not in volume.
That's true. There's a lot that happens in this series, but over just 12 episodes. Yes. So, and I'm super curious what you made of this, Sean, because last time we talked, neither of us had watched this yet. You and I both waited until the whole thing had aired, because it looked like it was going to be short. And the times were busy, and it was just like, oh, we'll watch it over the summer. And so I binged this thing in 2 days. I enjoyed it a lot. I think it's very, very fun. I don't know if I would quite go to the level of saying, like, this is a great Gundam show or one of my favorites or anything like that, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. I have some specific things holding me back, but overall, I mean, very, very fun binge over 2 days. There's a lot going on in this show.
Yeah, I think I'm probably more negative than you, just in, like, I think it is like a very enjoyable show to watch, but it's also a very frustrating show to watch because it is a show that I think ultimately doesn't end up kind of fulfilling any of its kind of visions of what it wants to be, whether you're looking at it as this weird multiverse Gundam, like we're doing weird shit with Gundam stuff for Gundam fans, or if you're looking at it as I want a story of it with original characters and see what it does with those. I don't think what it ultimately comes down on is satisfying in either of those dimensions, but it has so much potential in both those spaces, and it's such a cool production, particularly in terms of like the visuals and the music and the sound design. All that stuff is so good that I did end up walking away from the show kind of disappointed by what it ultimately ended up being.
Yeah, and I think we're talking probably matters of degrees here, because I doubt we're going to disagree on any of this, because like when I say it's, because it is like undeniably very entertaining. I think like that's it's a well-made show. The production is really cool. You know, all of that. It's obviously aimed right at the Gundam super fans in us. So there's a lot of, you know, ooh, look at that kind of things going on. But no, I found that, like, it didn't have kind of the depth I wanted it to have by the end. I definitely think, to me, the biggest problem is that I think it's way too short. I think, like, you get to, it feels like a 2-core show shoved into 1 core. Specifically, the stuff that happens in episode 7 feels like a season finale, and it feels like a season finale that needed 5 or 6 more episodes before then, where I really know Nyan and Machu and Shuji and why they care about each other and who they are for that to land. And then I think the second half isn't as poorly paced, but I think it also needed, like, more stuff to happen before you get to that ending point, because I think it could have serviced both sides of what it's doing, and I think that would have made it a very special Gundam show. But as it is, it's kind of a fun, flashy, entertaining thing. But, like, you know, it does not have anywhere near, I feel like, the depth or innovation that Witch from Mercury had, or the sort of, like, punch that even just part 1 of Hathaway's Flash had. This has been a very, very good decade for Gundam so far, and a very packed decade. And like, I don't think this is a bad Gundam by any means. It is probably my least favorite of all the 2020s Gundam things we have had, which, you know, there have been a lot of very good ones. So it's a stacked competition, but that's probably where I come down on it too.
Yeah, that's basically how I feel. That it's like it's a show that's more disappointing than it is bad to me. Like it's as you say, it's a very enjoyable watch. I watched it the same way you did. Of like, I basically binged it over the course of 2 days, and I do think that was a better way to watch it than watching it piecemeal. I imagine that there are probably some people who ended up being very frustrated by just like. You know, I think if you get invested into the original characters of this show, like like the show is ultimately not that interested in them. It is more interested in like the Gundam bullshit. And I think that that's a lot like easier to stomach when you're just like going through it really quickly and then it's like, okay, it's done and I'm through the show. I think I would have been incredibly frustrated if I was watching this week to week and just like having to kind of piece out what is it doing and then arriving at like really not all that much is the answer.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So let's get into it, Sean. I mean, we already did the basic history and context when we did the movie episode, so I imagine we don't need to go through all that again, but how do you want to kind of set this up for us?
Yeah, I don't have any, like, I've like in our notes document, I basically just copied over what we did on the movie and did some editing and added some stuff for the cast. We're not going to go through all those notes, but just like a reminder of what we're talking about here in terms of who's making this. So GQuuuuuuX, this is our collaboration with Studio Khara, right? Who, you know, easy shorthand is they are the Neon Genesis Evangelion people rising from the grave of Studio Gainax, basically, to be an actual animation production studio and not a front, which is kind of what Studio Gainax ultimately
not a front for a tax scheme. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And specifically within Studio Khara, the main guy we're talking about is Tsurumaki Kazuya, who's the director of this show, also someone who's credited on storyboards for every single episode, though most episodes have a second person credited as well. But obviously this is Tsurumaki's show. He started as an animator in the 80s when he joined Studio Gainax. He worked on Nadia, the Secret of Blue Water. I would need to, now that I've actually watched Nadia since I originally put these notes together, I'm curious to go back and look at which parts of that show he did the most work on. Because when you're talking about Nadia, as I now understand, you're talking about multiple different TV shows within that one TV show. But point being, that was like the big thing he started working on with Gainax. But then what people would know him for primarily is in 2000, he debuted as a director on the show Fooly Cooly, which has a lot of shared DNA with GQuuuuuX. Afterwards, he directed Tapo no Rai 2, or Die Buster, the sequel to Gunbuster, or sort of sequel to Gunbuster. And he followed Anno when Anno founded Studio Khara in 2006, where Tsumaki has been one of the co-director on the Shin Evangelion movies. So he's like one of the, like, he's one of the main Studio Khara guys. And they have been working on GQuuuuuX for a long time. Since 2018 specifically is when it began development. And I did watch some interviews earlier this morning where they did in Japan a rescreening of GQuuuuuX beginning after the last episode aired. And there was like a kind of stage talk with the director and the writer and stuff. And the way they kept on talking about the show was like, oh yeah, we've been working on this for 5 years. So it seems to me that like it really has been a long time development working on GQuuuuuX, which makes sense for Studio Khara. Like they spend a lot of time on their projects. And you'll see when we get into some of these other credits that it's a fairly lean production, certainly by modern anime standards in terms of the number of people that worked on this show, rather than Witch from Mercury, where I think everybody working on the animation industry in Japan touched Witch from Mercury at one point or another, because there's just everybody had to work on that. This is like a very Studio Khara production that they spent a lot of time working on, very kind of diligently and thoroughly, the way you can think of the way they worked on those Shin Evangelion movies, which they took a very long time to make, but they're really immaculate productions, and I think that's what you see with GQuuuuuX as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And definitely the Tsurumaki touch is like very clear throughout this thing. And the idea that, you know, at least there was that one consistent storyboarder in him on every episode makes sense, because I think it has a very consistent style of not just visuals, but editing, the way scenes are composed, all of that kind of stuff. It, you know, if anything, this feels like a long Gundam movie, less than a show in some ways.
Yeah, it has such a consistency of style and voice, and that very much comes from Tsurumaki. The other person that comes from is the writer for the show, for the series composition credit, is Enokido Yoji. Enokido was one of the main writers for the Sailor Moon series, as well as the director Ikuhara Kunihiko's follow-up work, Revolutionary Girl Utena. And he was also one of the writers for the original TV Neon Genesis Evangelion show. So he also is the writer for every episode. Like, this is very much a, like, when I watched those interviews from that rescreening of Beginning, Tsurumaki and Enokido, it was, like, clear that it is very much a, like, collaboration from the two of them. Like, the thing they talked about was the spark for the idea was them, like, having a drunk conversation 20-something years ago, being like, man, Shalia Bull in the novels for Gundam was really cool, huh? Man, if they ever do, like, a remake of Gundam, they gotta do more Shalia Bull stuff. And that is, like, literally what they say is, like, the germ of GQuuuuuX, is being like, man, Shalia Bull. Like, what if they did, like, Shalia Bull, like, all the way? And that is what GQuuuuuX basically ended up being.
I mean, honestly, Shalia Bull is my favorite part of this show. I think it is a tremendous take on that character, and as someone who has read the novels, I know exactly what they're talking about, and I love that dude here. He rocks. Yeah, Enokido wrote every single episode except 2 and the first half of 8, which are the parts set in the original One-Year War, and that is Anno Hideaki wrote those parts. So, other than that, every word of this is Enokido.
Yes, and as we talked about in the beginning episode, those One-Year War sections were originally going to be much smaller in the original conceptualization of the show, and then Anno got his hands on it. It was like, no, like I got some shit that I want to do, and so it like ballooned in size. And yes, so those are like, that is like Anno's big contribution to this series specifically, is that kind of flashback stuff with Char during the One-Year War, getting the Red Gundam and all that stuff.
And he did some of the storyboarding in those sections as well, so that's where he worked on this.
And then in terms of some of the other people we're talking about here, character design, which I think is very striking for this series, is done by Take. Again, we talked about this person on the beginning podcast, but the thing you would really recognize their designs from is like a lot of the modern day Pokemon stuff, both in terms of Pokemon, but particularly the human characters in things like Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet. And I just think particularly, like, you look at Machu and Yan and Shuji, and those characters look like they are gym leaders from modern Pokemon in a good way. Like, they just have that very hip, modern, sleek look to them. And I think it's one of the things that leads to my disappointment in the show is, like, I want way more of those characters because they're such good designs. They're so expressive. They move so well on the screen. And I do think, like, they're just really, really great character designs.
Oh, they're so good. And I assume it was Take who made the decision to give Haro a beanie. And it's amazing when you look at it that it took 46 years of Gundam history to get to Beanie Haro, because Haro with a beanie is one of the best Haros ever. Looks so cool. I love these character designs, and it is goofy as hell, but I also love how hard it clashes when you have Machu in a scene with, like, Char Aznable, and Char will lean in, and Machu just is out of a Pokemon anime. Like, completely, it's just two completely different design languages for characters, and the way, and that's stuff that, like, genuinely I think is great about this show, is when it lets that kind of design language clash, and it's where, like, I think if it added more time to let the multiverse concept and the actual story of these characters concept kind of bounce off each other, it's something that is genuinely cool about this series, is the way those things clash with each other and are meant to clash.
Yes, absolutely. Like, I wished it got more out of that juxtaposition, because that juxtaposition is very powerful. One other prominent designer on the show that, like, whose touch you can feel particularly very distinctly once Nyan gets her
G-Fred, yes.
The G-Fred, Fred himself in the show. The mechanical design is Yamashita Ikuto, who's one of the main mechanical designers for Neon Genesis Evangelion, as well as Nadia. But yes, I do love how, like, the GQuuuuuX itself already looked Evangelion enough, and then they get a purple-green one, and I'm like, okay, you guys know what you're doing. You're doing it on purpose. I'm amazed they had the restraint to not call it the G-Vangelion or something like that. Like, it is so close to, Shinji's Eva from the original series or the remakes. Like, it's amazing. It is a cool design, though. I mean, all the designs in this they're very extra. They're very, Studio Khara-esque. It's not my absolute favorite design language for mechs, but I do like it, and I like how hard they go with it. Yeah, and it leads to some of that juxtaposition thing we're talking about, where For most of the series, those the mechs are like CG, and they're very like obviously prominently CG. Like the designs are designed to work in 3D CG, right? They've got like that level of complexity to them. But there are those moments in the 1 Year War flashbacks, and then very prominently near the end when the original Gundam comes through the portal or whatever, where they are either hand-drawn or they are done in CG to make them appear hand-drawn in some of the more actiony shots. And that's another thing I think is cool about the mechanical designs, is they are working with that contrast. They are saying, like, here is this, like, the world of GQuuuuuuX developed these, like, crazy fucking super weird hyper detailed mechas. And then when we're doing some 1 Year War ass stuff, we're making it look more like hand-drawn traditional 2D animation. And I think that's also a very cool part of the mechanical design of this show.
Absolutely.
All right, and then the last kind of overall credit here, we have the music is done by two people, Teruya Yoshimasa and Hasu Masayuki. They are both members of the band Seraph, S-I-R-A-P-H, Seraph, with a lowercase s, just because you have to be very particular with your typography to talk about Japanese bands. And they're not like particularly known for anime stuff, but some of the anime stuff they've done is very, very prominent. Most notably, they're the team like responsible for the music for Jujutsu Kaisen. And the music in the show, I think, is very good. And it's like a very prominent part of the show, not just them, but we'll talk about in a second, the absolute plethora of insert songs. There's an insert song in almost every single episode. Most episodes have multiple insert songs. It's a very kind of, because the show is so fast-paced, I do feel like it is leaning on the aesthetics, both in the visuals and the music, to lend the vibe the show needs to get past the amount of story it's trying to get through in a very compressed amount of time.
I think the soundtrack is fantastic. I mean, this is true of every Gundam show ever made, good, bad, whatever. Gundam just always delivers with the music. This is absolutely part of that. I think it's a great score. I'm really excited for the full soundtrack to be out, because I enjoyed the hell out of it. And I think the whole like sound design of this show is very good. Again, production-wise, this is all pretty impeccable. But yeah, I really enjoyed this soundtrack, and I think it has a very distinct quality to it. It, you know, in some places sounds like other Gundam shows, and I don't mean the parts where they're literally redoing Gundam 79. I just mean, like, there's a sort of quality that makes it feel like it belongs in the world of Gundam, but then is a little extra, a little different here and there, particularly when the insert songs, which are usually composed by people kind of from this group, come in. It's just, there's a lot of good stuff.
Yes, yeah, the music's very good, and it's just used as such a vital part of what the show is. Like, I feel like the music is more important to this show than it is most whatever Gundam, like most anime. Again, part of like the show needs to get by on vibes so much. That's the Tsurumaki, that's the Fooly Cooly energy of it. You know, it's like we gotta vibe this thing out, bro, because there's like whether the story's always hitting is maybe a bigger question, but the vibes are always on point, and the show is getting by a lot on that, and the music's a big part of that. And then with the music, we have, I don't think we're going to go through every single insert song here, because there is a lot. I don't know how many of them jumped out to you, Jonathan. But for opening themes and ending themes, our opening theme for the show is Plasma by Yonezu Kenshi. This was also an insert song in the movie version, so we talked about it there. But obviously Yonezu Kenshi, he's like one of the biggest artists in Japan. Or like in the world, really, but specifically a Japanese, one of the biggest Japanese artists on any stage. Obviously, this song was a huge hit in terms of where it charted. Personally, it's not, if I'm ranking it of like Yonezu Kenshi songs, it's not like my favorite, but it is a very good song. And I always appreciate, in terms of opening animations, when the opening animation feels like it's designed to just murder video streaming compression algorithms, and that's what this opening, like the shots of them running with like the sparkles and all the spinning colors, and it's like, man, no video streaming service on the planet can handle what this fucking opening animation is throwing down here.
Oh, this whole show is designed for that. I mean, anytime the sparkle the Kira happens, all of the fight sequences are so fast. Those all break down. Like, I was watching this on, I pirated this show because I was not going to go watch it on Amazon. Fuck that platform. It's just everything about that platform is awful. But even then, like, they were decent, like, downloads I got, but they definitely were way too low bitrate. I'm excited for this show to come out on Blu-ray because it does look so good. Like, it looked so good on IMAX when the beginning movie came out that, like, it deserves a much better stream than it got, because this, like, the visuals are so, ambitious that it really breaks down on streaming platforms. You definitely see that in the opening. But yes, no, this is a very good Yonezu Kenshi song. I don't like it as much as, like, you know, the Chainsaw Man opening or some of those other, like, classics he's done, but it's very good. And again, it's just kind of like, oh, right, Yonezu somehow hadn't done a Gundam theme yet. That's crazy. Now he has good, it's the right song for this show.
Yes, because he did also do the main theme for Shin Ultraman, so I do feel like he's maybe just like checking things off a bucket list or something. It's like, okay, I've done an Ultraman one, okay, now I've done a Gundam one, can I do a Super Sentai one next? Like, are they going to do new, if they ever do more Dragon Ball stuff, I need to get in on that.
Oh my god, he'd be perfect for that. That'd be sick. Yeah.
But yes, it's a very good opening. Then for ending theme, we've got Mo do Nate mo Iya by Hoshimachi Suisei, who is a VTuber for the Hololive agency. So I really like her stuff there. The song is composed by Itai Naoki and Tsujima Murayuki. And this was another one that was an insert song, I believe in episode 3, that was then in the TV version, or sorry, is an insert song in the episode 3 content in the movie beginning, that in the episode 3 DV version they replaced with her other song Yoru ni Saku, which is another, like, the B-side of basically the single they did with those two songs. So those are the two Hoshimachi Suisei songs. So we heard the song, but we had not seen what the ending looked like. And I like the song just fine. I think it's a good song. But I love the ending animation of Nyan and Machu in the room, in this, like, 70s styled room, which I think is a good throwback to Mobile Suit Gundam being from 1979. It's got, like, a disco ball and, like, a record player and all this stuff in there, and they're just chilling. Like, I feel like that ending theme animation does so much more work to develop those two characters than anything in the actual, like, main content of the show. It's like that, when I'm talking about it getting by on vibes, like, the entire character relationship between Yan and Machu is motivated by that ending theme animation being very good and charming. And that's what the show's leaning on, I think, a lot.
Yeah, it's true, and it is. I actually probably prefer the ending theme, both the song and the animation to the opening. I think it's like the special one of those two that feels like a little more notable to me, and it is very good, yeah.
Yeah, and just, I think, like, Hoshimachi Suisei is such a good singer that it's cool to have her in a big production like this. And I really like Yoru ni Saku. I actually think I like that song a bit more as a piece of music. But yes, we then also have, well, I guess we'll talk about this more when we get to talking about the episode, but you do have Beyond the Time by TM Network. It's just the original version for episode 11 as a special ending theme, which is a pretty sick fucking needle drop. And then you've just got an entire wall of insert songs. Most of these are by two different artists. So we have a bunch of insert songs by my favorite band name ever, No Melon, No Lemon, all in capitals, no melon being one word, no lemon being one word, and it is a very hard thing to type because your brain starts to break down on, like, where's the melon, where's the lemon. It's very good. If you've got, like, dyslexia, it is basically an impossible band name to process. But they did a bunch of songs, and then you also have an artist named Okachi Orika who also did a bunch of songs. And then you've got the special ending theme in episode 12, which is by an artist named Shania Yan. The point being, there's just an absolute metric shit ton of insert songs in this show. Like, there's three different insert songs play over the course of the first episode, whether it's they put the opening theme as an insert or whatever. Like, it is just packed with music in that way, and it's just a very fundamental style of the show. Again, it's a show made by the guy who directed Fooly Cooly, so it's just like the music is such a fundamental part of the DNA of this show, and you can see that in the ridiculous number of insert songs it has.
Absolutely, and I like them all. I think, like, all the songs are good. I think this show has, as you would expect from Tsurumaki and the Khara crew, a very, like, synesthetic sense of how to mix music and animation and build these sequences. Like, none of them feel like they, took an insert song and put it over a scene that wasn't intended to have it. They all feel very built for the insert songs. And that's part of where, again, like, if you're binging this show, you're vibing with it, even if the story doesn't completely come together, and I don't think it does. Like, it is so enjoyable because every time one of these songs hit, you're just like, oh, fuck yeah, this scene rocks. And I thought I had gotten all the insert songs into my Gundam playlist, and I'm looking at your list here, Sean, and I did not. There's so many.
Yes.
There's so fucking many. And I've been seeking them all out because there isn't yet like an album compiling them, which you could do. You could do a full album of all the songs for this show without any of the score, and it would like fill a CD. That'd be great.
Yeah, like one thing I thought is interesting with the music part specifically is I watched, there's a YouTube video that they did. They've done a couple of these. I only watched the first one where some of the cast basically do a live commentary over one of the episodes. Where you have to stream it on your own, but they're like doing a live stream and they talk over it. And I did that watched that for the first episode. And it ended with like and here's our promotional information about the show, when it airs, all this kind of stuff. And they had a really long section at the end of that of them going like, and here's all the music and when it's like debuting and where you can buy it. And it was like, I listened to lots of anime podcast stuff when I watch some of these shows, and they usually have this sort of section where they do, here's our promotional information. And oftentimes there's maybe the thing that's like, oh, and the opening theme sung by Yonezu Kenshi, Plasma, it's blah, blah, blah. But it was like a 5-minute section of them just going through, and then the official album, and this and that and the other thing. I'm like, holy shit. Like, clearly, like, the music, not just from a, like, production point of view, but from, like, a marketing point of view, it's just part of the identity of the show in a way it's just not with most TV anime. Like, it's just a really big part of what the show's whole thing is, kind of inside and out, I guess.
And I guess we should also mention here, Sean, that this show was a massive hit.
Yes.
Like, as basically every Gundam production in the 2020s, other than maybe like Kukuru's Doan's Island, which wasn't a bomb or anything, but it wasn't like huge, everything else has been huge. Hathaway's Flash was at the time the second highest grossing Gundam movie. It's since been unseated by both Seed Freedom, which is the highest, and then GQuuuuuX Beginning, which is the second highest.
Yeah.
And then you had Witch from Mercury, which is the biggest TV show they'd had since Gundam Seed. This one was like very big, particularly in Japan, but I think it crossed over into the US more than you would expect from something that is this like in the weeds with Gundam 79 stuff. It's just, we're in like one of the most like popular periods of Gundam history right now, which is wild. And you know what? It all happened after we started Weekly Suit Gundam. So I'm not saying we're to blame, but I think if Sunrise wanted to send us a free Hara with a beanie as a thank you, I would not say no.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it's us. It's all us.
Okay.
It was Weekly Suit Gundam. Without us, Gundam, the franchise would be dead, really, if we had not resurrected it by creating an incredibly on time weekly podcast every week, in and out, just promoting that Gundam. But yes, it is a big hit. I think it makes sense in Japan where, while it is very in the weeds with Gundam stuff, like, you don't, other than maybe like some of the stuff, episode 12 gets very exposition dumpy in places that probably could get a little eye watering if you're like, I can't follow all this information. But for most of it, if you know what a char is, you're fine. And there's just nobody in Japan who doesn't know what a char is. And then in America, I think like one of the advantages this show has is its aesthetic feels like it is a modern Toonami show, kind of like Fooly Cooly. Like, it just feels like it's pulling on a kind of like anime aesthetic. It's modernized, it's not trying to be retro per se, but that really bright, energetic visual style and like the way the music works and like all that stuff. I just think it sort of pulls on a certain kind of anime fan aesthetically. That's not like serviced by most modern anime, right? Like, this just looks so different than whatever random isekai show you're going to put on or anything like that. It just has a really, 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 really striking look. And Studio Khara doesn't put out a lot of stuff. And so you just don't see a lot of stuff from them that's hitting this aesthetic. The only other studio that I think kind of does stuff in this space aesthetically is Studio Trigger, and they also don't put out a huge amount of stuff all the time. And so there is just even outside of the Gundamness of it, on a pure aesthetic level, the production is so good. What visual style it's going for is so striking that I just think it stands out tremendously amongst everything else that's coming out these days.
Definitely. And I wonder how much bigger it could have been in America if it wasn't on a streaming platform you have to fight to work. Because, God, Amazon Prime is a piece of, especially for anime, the way it does the subtitles with the giant black bars, just fucking awful. Terrible, terrible platform. But anyway, yes. Still, I was surprised, honestly, because, like, nothing ever breaks through on Amazon. That is not a platform that has hits. It has a Lord of the Rings show that no one has watched. Like, crazy. But no, this show broke through, which is cool to see.
Well, it's a lot easier for it to hit when it's in a medium that people are very used to pirating if they don't like the service that it's on. That the main service that exists in America for streaming anime, Crunchyroll, started as a pirating website. So there's a long tradition here. If you do not like where it's streaming on, or it's not streaming anywhere, anime fans will find a way.
Like life in Jurassic Park, anime fans will find a way.
Yes, we are the cockroaches of media consumers. Like it's like the fucking nuclear apocalypse could happen, and I'm still gonna find a fucking stream of my new Gundam show.
It's true. All right, with the cast, we already went through some of the main characters. Do you want to go through any of these now again, or do you want to just kind of come back to them as we go through some of the story here?
I think it probably makes sense just to hit the story stuff, rather than going down, because we talked about all the main characters, and the only characters we didn't talk about were some of like the minor characters in later episodes. So I think we should just kind of hit however we want to tackle the show, which raises the question, Jonathan, how do you want to tackle talking about the story of GQuuuuuuX?
I want to start with this, Sean. So we watched the movie, and we very much enjoyed it, because GQuuuuuuX Beginning is a great start, and the way GQuuuuuuX Beginning, if you didn't see it, but you saw the show, the way that was structured is that it is technically the content of episodes 1, 2, 3, and the first half of episode 8, but it is ordered as episode 2, first half of 8, 1, 3, because Studio Khara are a bunch of crazy freaks. But that structure feels very natural, because what that does is it combines all of the Hideaki Anno stuff that is the 0079, like, 1-year war content, where Char is basically your main character with Shalia Bull on the side. And that was the first half of the beginning movie, and it ends with the big Zek Nova, where Char and the Red Gundam disappear. And then it jumps forward, and then you have a solid, 40, 45 minutes with Machu and her world, which is what is episodes 1 and 3 in the final show. And I thought, that was a great start to the series. The way the actual show is chopped up, I tried to go in with an open mind, because of course I had seen Beginning. That had been festering in my brain for months, so I didn't want to be too biased. But I do think now that I've seen the whole thing, I don't really understand the decision to take the 0079 stuff and split that into 2 episodes halfway across the show, one of them interrupting the episode 1-3 content, because I just feel like it should have been what G-Witch did, what Witch from Mercury did, where Witch from Mercury has a prologue. Yeah. And that prologue episode, it's basically like listed as episode 0. It is necessary. You should watch it. It is part of the story. But they put it like separate. It's about the length of a normal episode, maybe a little bit longer, but that's its own thing. And then you get into the main story in the present day at the Otaku Academy and all of that stuff. And I think that was the right call for that show. Like, if you had taken that prologue and aired it as episode 5 as a flashback or something, I think that'd be weird. And I think it's weird here. I think, like, the Hideaki Anno thing should have just been presented as it was in the movie as kind of an episode 0, and then get into the main story. Because I think one of the very obvious problems it causes is that you meet Machu, you get into the new characters in episode 1, then you interrupt that for episode 2, where you get some but not all of the Char story. Then you get to episode 3, which is where you meet Shuji. And I do feel like if I have one thing that I would point to as the most obvious problem with GQuuuuuuX, it's that Shuji is completely deficient as a character, especially considering how much Machu and Yan's motivations revolve around Shuji. And part of that is that in the show as broadcast, you don't meet him until episode 3, and then he is gone in episode 7. And so he's only part of the story for that little 5-episode stretch. And it just doesn't work. And I think there's other problems going on here other than how they split up and presented the Char flashback stuff. But I think one easy fix would be that just should have been either just kept to the movie or presented as an episode 0 that was like a 40-minute special.
Yeah, I completely agree. And obviously, like, one thing here is there's, like, from a production point of view, there's a more complicated question of, like, how many episodes can they make and things like that. So I understand from a production, there's, like, a lot more complicated happening there. But purely talking about it from the perspective of an audience member, that I don't care what the production concerns, I just want to watch a good show. It feels like you're, like, robbed episodes or something, where it's like, because the flashback stuff is cool, but you don't actually need it. Like, if the show was just Shalia Bull in the present day, and all you learned about what happened with Char in this version of the 1 Year War was him talking about it and getting like, sort of like minor flashbacks that's totally contextualized through like Shalia Bull's memory, that would be more than enough. That could be like a small part of a couple of episodes that you kind of get that little extra flavor. But you don't need the whole, let's do huge sections of the 1 Year War from the perspective of Char in its own style, all that kind of stuff. Like, just wholly unnecessary to the story of GQuuuuuuX, particularly for the new characters and stuff. It's just so irrelevant. It becomes a little bit more like important kind of near the end, but still not necessary for you to like do what they do at the ending of the show. So it's like when you're watching it, it just feels like you have such a dearth of narrative and character development content for the new cast that when they then cut away and do half an episode in episode 8 doing more Char stuff, or they do like the episode 2 and you're like, okay, now I have to do a whole episode without any of these characters, and then I get Shuji, it just like feels like you're spending all this time on stuff that isn't really important for the thing that you want to watch, for me at least, which is the thing I most like about the show, are the new characters and their adventures in their lives. And it feels like you're kind of like robbed of that because you're constantly like having to look at all this old Char stuff that's cool, but feels like it should be, as you say, like a thing that only exists in the movie, or it is like an extra OVA special episode 0 thing or something like that. So again, I know from a production point of view, there's like more complicated things that go into those decisions. But from an artistic and narrative perspective, as an audience member, it just feels like you're kind of cheaped out by not getting all the stories that you actually want to see. And instead you're getting like very, as a guy who's a co-host of a Gundam podcast, very enjoyable fan-wankery bullshit, but it's fan-wankery bullshit, yes. There's no getting around it. It's there to tickle your fanish heart. But it's not really there to tell a story on its own.
No, totally. And, when this show started airing, I was not watching it as it aired, but I did look at, like, what episodes were coming out. And when I saw that they had started episode 1 with the episode called The Red Gundam, which is the beginning of the Machu stuff, I went, oh, they must have just decided that the stuff with Char in the past is from the movie, and it was a fun bonus. If you went to the theater, went to the cool IMAX showing or something, you got that cool backstory, but it's not necessary to the main story. And I think that would have been more than fine. I think that would have been a cool way to do it if beginning was like half an original thing that teed up the story and then half a preview of the show to come. Studio Khara has done stuff like that before. Gainax, like the way Eva, the first half of End of Evangelion, was originally in the recap movie. It's kind of like something like that, right? So that would have worked fine. I think splitting, and if it had to be part of the show, it should have just been an extended episode 1, episode 0, because I do think bisecting that episodes 1 and 3 and putting that in the middle and having Shuji's introduction be a quarter of the way into this 12-episode show is just objectively feels off. And then I would say, if you had that extra episode or 2 that would have been freed up by not having the Char stuff in the show itself, where you need it specifically is between episodes 3 and 4. That jump is the biggest problem in the whole show, in that episode 3 is the end of what was in the movie, where Machu and Shuji have their first clan battle and they win. And you then need at least one, I would say probably 3, 4, 5 episodes of status quo. You need them doing clan battles, hanging out, getting to know their world the same way, just to compare it to the most recent Gundam show, Witch from Mercury does not jump from the big thing that happens at the end of episode 1 with the proposal to what happens in episode 12, right? Exactly. It has a bunch of stuff at the school where they have different problems, they do different duels, your normal televisual thing of you have to have at least a little bit of episodic status quo before you can blow up the status quo, and it starts blowing up the status quo in episode 4, where you meet this witch character. Episode 5 is where Nyan gets in the Gundam, and then everything blows up from there. And it desperately needs time where, we get to know Shuji, we get to know what their relationship is like. We come to understand, why do Machu and Nyan both separately feel so obsessed with this cute boy beyond the fact that he is cute, which, because that's the only thing we know about him, winds up feeling like a very sexist plot point to me, in a way that it didn't have to if you had some time where we established a status quo, and it just feels like episodes are missing there.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, that's 100% how I feel. GQuuuuuuX as it exists is a show that's composed of only the big episodes from a TV show. You know, like the episodes that are the big status quo shifting episodes. But the problem is that doesn't function properly if you never had the status quo to begin with. Right. And there's only, like, in my reckoning, the only episode that is a, like, normal episode of GQuuuuuuX is episode 4. Because that's the only episode that's, like, we've got the whole main cast. You've got Shuji, you've got Yan, you've got Machu. They've all been introduced. You have a clan battle involving Machu, the main character, being in the clan battle, right? Because episode 5 has one, but it's not Machu anymore. So that's already a big, like, shift in the what would be the status quo. And they have the big fight, and it's like, it does feel like there should be more stuff building up to that, because it is weird to jump to, like, oh, and she's been in like 5 clan battles at this point, is like a very quick one. You want to see like her first and second clan battle before you jump to she's done multiple of these at this point. But like episode 4, which is also my favorite episode, it just gets to feel like, oh, it just gets to be a GQuuuuuuX episode. And it has like a fight that it introduces and it finishes within the context of its episode, and it feels like the characters develop over the course of it. But then immediately in episode 5, they start making big status quo shifting moves, and like, no, I liked the status quo. Like, I want a TV show that is Machu like dealing with her feelings with Shuji and this like weird friendship with Nyan, and like that whole like develop out that love triangle. If you want the love triangle, I want to see her relationship with Anki and the Pomeranian crew and all that develop. I want to see her struggling with her life at home and school with this like other life she has as an underground Gundam pilot. I want to see her struggle with like the violence that she's participant to. Like, I want to see the Gundam TV show happen. I don't want that to be like a fleeting pass we do in a single episode of this TV show, which is what it kind of ends up feeling like.
Well, and even then, episode 4, and I agree overall with what you're saying, but even then, episode 4 ends with a big status quo shifting moment, because that's where Shuji kills the witch character, which is a big shift. Like, and for that to work, you needed to have several clan battles where Shuji doesn't kill people for that to be shocking, right? Like, because the only clan battle where someone doesn't die is the one in episode 3. Everything else is just mayhem and madness and murder. And, like, that doesn't really work if it doesn't work as something that is supposed to feel like a line is being crossed if there never was a line established. And I think that's the issue. And again, structurally, I think you look at episode 7, the Machu's Rebellion episode, I think it's a very good episode. And like as a like big climax where everything goes to shit, it does that very well. But it feels like a season finale where we saw half the season. Like literally, because that is the 7th episode, but if you take out episode 2, the Char one, it's the 6th episode with Machu and company. And it does feel like it's supposed to be episodes 12 or 13 of the arc that would have been them on side 6 doing the stuff, and then season 2 would have been them out in space, which is the structure of many a Gundam show, to be clear. Whether it's, 1 core seasons or 2 core seasons, there's plenty of Gundam shows that have done that kind of structure, and I think this is trying to do that, but it really does feel like you're watching. It reminds me of like various compilation movies where just all of the episodic stuff has been cut, or almost feels like, a cut down of a longer show where, like, we're seeing, like, I know there's the TV cut of Gundam The Origin, and I haven't seen it, but I know it has to cut a lot of Gundam The Origin, because Gundam The Origin is longer than 13 episodes. And I imagine it feels like if you were watching that, like, this feels like a cut down of a Gundam OVA or something, where we're just missing big stretches of the show.
Yeah, or someone just made like, a really shitty, obnoxious view order online that they're trying to get. Where it's like, no, you gotta understand, this is the way you watch. You gotta cut out all the filler, guys. Like, you gotta watch episodes 1, and then 8, and then 27, and then 32, and this is the way you watch GQuuuuuuX. Like, that's kind of like what you end up with. Because I'm absolutely with you. Like, episode 7 is the one that feels like it's the big finale. It's absolutely equivalent to In Witch from Mercury, the episode with the big attack on the station at the end of season 1, where you have the big twist where Sleta, has her tomato splat moment, and you're like, oh, this is okay. Like, there's a lot more going on here, and it's like, we can never go back to fun duels at the school cool, like that's not a world that exists anymore. We have smushed that world and we're in a very different place. And then season 2 opens with them trying to go back to that world and it failing. And they're like, no, like you can't go back to what you had before. And that's definitely what episode 7 feels like, where it blows up the entire status quo for what it was. But the problem is that status quo was never really there. And it all hinges so much on what you were talking about earlier, this perceived relationship between Machu, Nyan, and Shuji, where Machu and Nyan are like very fixated on him. But there's been like one scene that sets that up, which is a good scene. I think it's in episode 5 where they're on the Red Gundam and they're like, it's like really hot and they're trying to cool themselves off and they're all kind of stripped down to their underwear. It's like, that's like a really cool, interesting scene that feels like it's playing with this like adolescent sexual energy that I thought was like really cool. But it's one scene. Like you got to do more than just that in order to build up the love triangle, especially because that's like the only scene before all this shit goes crazy that kind of implies or develops the love triangle thing. Like when you realize that Nyan also has romantic feelings for Shuji, to me came so out of nowhere. Like I get it with Machu because that's how it's like introduced when Machu meets him. But it is, and maybe this is partially because, you know, we watched the movie and so in my head, I had been like, you know, had that movie as like what it was for such a long time. But when all of a sudden you have this like weird energy between Nyan and Shuji, I'm like, what? Like, where the fuck did this come from? Like, it feels like they just kind of threw it in out of nowhere to create some kind of dynamic between Machu and Nyan because they just didn't find an actual relationship dynamic between those two characters to do.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's another issue in this early going that continues on to the end in terms of kind of damning some parts of the show. And yes, both you and I are coming from the position of having watched the beginning movie months ago and having that rattling around in our head. But that is the content of the show also. So it's not like we're pulling on something. We're not pulling on like a novel version of the story or something. This is what's in the show. And what's in the show, if you look at episodes 1 and 3, which is the setup of all of this, and what was the second half of the beginning movie, it sets it up as Nyan and Machu being the main relationship. Like, I just feel like in the cinematic grammar of what happens, like her jumping over Nyan at the like ticket booth, or Nyan jumping over Machu at the ticket booth and like losing the thing and then them finding each other, that is the spark that starts the show, to the point that in the Yonezu Kenshi song, that's what the lyrics are about in Plasma. That's like, it starts with, if I had never met you at that ticket gate. Like, that's the first line of the song. So like, it very clearly wants to impress that upon you. And if you watch episodes 1 and 3, Shuji comes in and Shuji's interesting and like is a new dynamic in there. But it still feels to me like, you know, Machu gets into the clan battle and does all of that with Shuji because she wants to help Nyan, who has the money problems from being a refugee and doing this courier work and all of that stuff. And after episode 3, Nyan and Machu are never the main dynamic of the show. Like, once you move past the stuff that was in the movie, it's all about Shuji, and it feels weird. It feels like you had a very queer-coded dynamic that suddenly gets heteronormatized in a very, like, ham-fisted way to me, because whether like you go fully like these characters are in love or there's something, I do think both Machu and Nyan are queer-coded in pretty obvious ways to me, like in a lot of things about their character design and their bearing, particularly Nyan. It just, and the whole idea that this is a show where you have the Machu character who has the life above ground, where she is from an aristocratic family or a rich family or something, but she's in a, Ojo-san, right? She's like, the young miss, and she's going to the nice school and all of that. And then she has the like punk nightlife where she's out wearing her beanie with friends. Like, there's just, that is a like queer-coded dynamic, very obviously, where she's exploring some part of herself. But if what she's exploring is that she and her girl best friend are both into the cute boy, I'm sorry, that's not an interesting version of that story, and it's not what I felt was set up in episodes 1 and 3, and it just feels inherently kind of deflating that never is part of it, all the way to the finale where Nyan basically has the Shin Asuka position of crying on the moon outside of the climax, which feels wrong for the character who seemed to be our deuteragonist, our secondary protagonist, but really isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's Because it's this thing of where, like it just, like, the Nyan Machu relationship just feels like a thing that just got dropped, you know? Like, it's just, because it's just not there in the show after episode 3. But you're absolutely right. Like, the inciting incident of everything is about these two characters connecting. And then they try to do the, like, and then they become rivals on either side, but you know, that happens when the show's almost over and those characters have had, like, no interaction after episode 3 in any meaningful way, other than Machu getting like jealous of Nyan's developing thing with Shuji and Nyan being able to see the Kira and that stuff. But there's, like, they never really built up that friendship as anything, because all the episodes where that would have happened don't exist in the show. It's the episodes you talked about that, like, would be there between episodes 3 and 4, where she's going on multiple clan battles and you find out more about Nyan. Like, you never get into Nyan's backstory in any meaningful way. The most you get is, like, a couple of occasional flashes of, like, a newspaper that says refugees and she looks sad, and it's like, okay, she must be a refugee from somewhere, but they never get into her history or anything like that. It just is, like, Nyan specifically feels like such a, like, unrealized character on this show, which is just very frustrating, because she's got a great design. It's a great vocal performance by Ishikawa Yui, who's obviously an incredible actress, and I love, like, the initial energy and dynamic that character has with Machu in the material that was from the movie. And I like the idea of her becoming the rival pilot, and her getting G-Fred. Like, those are all the right ideas, because, you know, because it's just aping a lot of the different Gundam stuff that has done that kind of stuff before. But it is not actually putting in, because it doesn't have the episodes, it's not putting in the legwork to actually do any of that stuff. It's, like I said before, it's like it's a TV show that's only doing the big episodes. But if you're only doing the big episodes, I don't feel anything for the characters, because I never saw any of their relationship actually happen.
No, I completely agree. And this is part of the frustration, is that I do like all the stuff that happens. Like episode 5, which has my favorite episode title, Nyan Doesn't Know About the Kira. It's such a weird, great episode title. But that is the one where...
The best part of that is getting to hear the actor who plays Shalia Bull have to say it, because he says all the titles, because that's the thing that Captain Bright said did in the original Gundam show. But, like, having him see, like, Nyan wa Kira Shiranai. It's like, yes, I love hearing the, you know, sexy old man voice. Give me that. It's very good.
It's very good. But like, that episode is the big turning point where you have Machu is stuck in, like, the locker with Ensign Xavier, who is the original pilot of the GQuuuuuuX and all of that. And so Nyan tries to help by going and getting in the Gundam. I love that plot point. I like that, you know, suddenly, like, I think the fight in that one is maybe my favorite battle in the series, where Nyan just starts chucking the red Gundam at the other opponents as the way they do the MAV whole concept. I think that's the best use of the MAV concept, which kind of gets dropped in the second half of this show. In this show, like, all of that is really cool. And what happens after that, where you get into everything kind of breaks apart, and suddenly they're on opposite ends of the war, and then Nyan is off getting sort of, like, becoming, like, a surrogate daughter to Kaisilia Zabi and all of that, which I think is, like, maybe the coolest use of the existing Gundam characters, even though it's not fully, you know, realized, I think, but it's a cool idea, and I like all of that. Like, I love all of those plot points. I think they're all well done as you watch them, but it is this, again, that feeling of it feels like you're watching a cut down version where you don't have all the necessary context to really get into it, because think of how much harder all of those scenes and episodes would hit if you really, like, had a better connection to these characters, and you understood, like, how much of a place of love Nyan did this from to try to cover for Machu, and if you fully understood why Machu is so jealous in that moment, and if you understood what Shuji meant to both of them, like, all of those plot points, I think, are the right plot points delivered after just way, way, way too little setup.
Absolutely. Like, one of the things it feels like is it's kind of like when you're watching the Gundam F91 movie, where you kind of have to be watching you're watching two things at the same time. Like, part of your brain has to be watching the thing that you're actually watching, and then the other part of your brain is just using your knowledge of Gundam tropes to try to fill in all the blanks you can in order to enjoy the show, because the show is operating purely on Gundam tropes. Like, all those plot points and the things it's doing are things you have seen multiple other Gundam shows do before, and I do think this show is very good at aping Gundamisms. It's very good at, like, the writing. I think it's, like, probably the best non-Tomino show at doing those, like, the dialogue and the intercuts within action scenes and stuff like that. Like, it's really, really good at mimicking those rhythms and all that kind of stuff in those key moments. And so you're kind of, like, watching those and getting that dose of Gundam, but because it's playing on all these tropes, your other part of your brain, for me, I'm, like, filling in, yes, but there would have been the 10-episode arc here, and then they would have gone to Earth, and then this and that. It's like, there's what the whole TV show would have actually been. Instead, you're presented with a thing that doesn't have any of those elements. But in order for me to enjoy it, kind of like F91, when you get to the mid part of F91, my brain is kind of, like, actively being, like, seeing in my mind's eye what that TV show would have been if they had been able to make it. That's kind of the weird way in which I kind of had to watch GQuuuuuuX as well.
I agree, and I thought of F91 as well. I think one of the differences with F91, though, is that F91 is also trying to do something so substantially kind of different and new with the material, because it was Tomino and everyone's attempt to take kind of the next step forward past the original arc that ended in Char's counterattack. And so it has, a different sort of design language and some different narrative beats. I think the way that movie ends, which is its best part, also feels like a next step of the story. And there are a lot of original, cool, very Khara-esque things about GQuuuuuuX, but it is, by virtue of, again, its second episode being a 30-minute tongue bath to Gundam 79, which, to be clear, you and I have given much longer tongue baths to Gundam 79, so we're not blaming anyone here, but because of that, it doesn't feel like it is going for something as new, and so I feel like the work of putting in all that extra, like, here's where this would have happened, feels to me less rewarding than in Gundam F91, which overall I would say is a stronger Gundam thing than this.
Yeah, absolutely. Because F91 is way better than this. I think there's no question about that for me. Certainly. Because I think the other thing is that, like, as you say, the ultimate goal that F91 is working towards is very fascinating. Whereas, like, the ultimate goal that GQuuuuuuX is working towards is, like, a dumb multiverse thing that, like, is, like, it gets your, like, fan, like, oh, but if this and that and the other thing, but it's not actually. I mean, most multiverse things are not good. As someone who used to read American comic books when I was a kid, there's, multiverse stories are the territory of bad comic book crossovers for a reason. Most of them are very poor. You can do good multiverse stuff. I just think it's hard and it's very rarely well done. And this is that kind of version where it's just like, it's so self-serving. It's not looking at anything. It's not pushing anything forward. It's not trying to look beyond a horizon. It's very, very, very satisfied to just stare at its own navel and be like, and look at how exquisite this navel is. Wasn't this navel so good? Remember that navel? Obviously in this case, the navel being Gundam 79. But it's like, it's just so satisfied for that to be the end goal, which is like, I really like the first Gundam, but I don't need a whole other TV show that tells me that show was really good. And that's kind of what it feels like GQuuuuuuX ends up funneling into.
Yeah, I don't know if I would be that brutal on it. I agree directionally, though. Like, I think there's some interesting ideas in the end. This does not bother me, and maybe it's because I'm a huge Gundam fan. This does not annoy me as much as a lot of other multiverse stories do, because I think it's at least trying to tell a story with it. But, like, again, it is something where, like, that's where I think in the finale, and I think the last couple episodes are really, well made. They're very engaging. They're very exciting. They definitely capture that Tomino style intensity of an ending, and all of that is fun to watch. But that is where you feel like the other half of the equation of what has been given the short shrift is the Gundam, meta text stuff, which is something, the Studio Khara folks, Anno in particular, are very good at, as we saw in the Shin Evangelion movies and in the Shin Ultraman, Shin Godzilla, Shin Kamen Rider, all of the stuff where they're kind of examining pop culture metatexts. I do wonder if Gundam is something where they're just too big of fans to like have the necessary kind of distance to really go for it, because you do in that final 2 episodes is where there's some great moments, but you do feel like I don't know the main characters of this show well enough for the emotional beats to land. And I don't think their vision of how they are metatextually playing with Gundam 79 has had enough time to develop past the, man, Lala is cool, and like Char is cool, and I love this story stuff. For it to feel the way that, like, the end of the last Shin Evangelion movie feels, where it is both a full emotional like end to the story of this version of Ikari Shinji and a full emotional reckoning with what Neon Genesis Evangelion is to them. I don't think, because those are like the 2 halves of the equation they're going for. I think that EVA movie is a perfect version of it. This feels like a pretty hollow imitation of it. Yeah,
like, because I think one of the things is I was very disappointed once I realized that it's a multiverse thing. Like, I was so much more interested in the just, like, it's an alternate history Gundam. That, like, just what if Char got in the Gundam, and what is the world of Gundam if the Zombies win? And I think when it's just doing that stuff's very interesting from a Gundam fan perspective of, like... Yeah. Of course, yes, the world that the Zombies would create is not one where space noids are free. Like, you're still having this kind of space noid oppression. They're just being oppressed by other space noids now instead of the people from Earth. So you have, like, the squalor of Side 6 and all the politicking there in those first few episodes, I think, is interesting. I mean, most of that is stuff that's in the movie. They don't do a lot of it after the movie. But you get, like, those little glimmers of it and, like, where Cameron Bloom is in this universe and that kind of stuff. But I especially love when they do the Zabi family plotting against itself, right? That in this world, the Kaisili and Giran both survive. So of course, it's the Zabi family is a pit of vipers. So it's even when Zeon wins, Zeon loses because they can't, as long as the Zabis are in control, there's always going to be war on the horizon. There's always going to be plotting. And those things, when the show is just doing that, I think that's from a Gundam fan perspective, that's cool. And it also is telling a different story that feels like it can do new things. When that then gets funneled into, but all of this is really just building up to, this is a multiverse where it's an alternate universe created, and we'll get into some of this because all of it is very weird. I don't understand why they did it like this. But it's like created from what is already an alternate universe, because it's not really the events of a cosmic glow that you see that Lala experienced, where Char dies, because he of course doesn't die in that episode in the actual Gundam. It's all this shit. But anyways, like once it funnels down into this is just a multiverse story, and this is one of an infinite number of universes and stuff like that, it just feels like it shrinks the possibility space so dramatically. And especially when you hitch that to new type stuff, it just makes the new type stuff feel really boring, because instead of the new typeness being something that gestures towards an unknown future, an unseeable horizon of possibilities that we can't conceive of because it's a newer, better version of what it is to be human, instead it's, we can get to the other side. We can get to Gundam. We can get to actual Gundam. That's what being a new type is in this universe. It's like, that sucks. Like, that just shrinks and kills the possibility space of new typeism and all that stuff in such a kind of like boring and kind of self-serving way for the story that, again, it makes the story feel very small and dull. Like, you can reach out with your hands and just touch the entire borders of what the story is so easily, rather than what, like in Gundam, it feels like the story is taking place in this boundless universe that you can't fathom the depths of. Like, Tomino in particular was so good at creating that sense of the larger world, both like metaphysically, spiritually, politically, materially of Gundam. And it's like this vast thing you're experiencing. And then here, it feels like you thought you're getting a vast thing, but instead here is this little tiny box that you're given. And that moment, once I realized that's what they're doing, was where my disappointment in the show really started to kind of crest.
I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, my prior on this is that there is no such thing as a good multiverse story, and there never will be. Maybe other than, like, there's one I like. It's the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, and that's because it's purely using the multiverse as a metaphor for the idea of lives not lived, but it is rooted in something very mundane. I think you can make it work in that kind of thing. Also, Everything Everywhere at Once is not an existing franchise within the, like, you know, Marvel Cinematic Universe or something, where it's like the multiverse relies on recognizing things from pre-existing content. So I think, okay, that kind of multiverse story can work. But I think in a franchise setting, multiverses always fail to me, and I think they fail for the fundamental reason that you are expressing, Sean, which is that it is a way of having faux infinity, but actually really closing the boundaries of what this is, because it means the story can only ever be permutations of the existing world. You know, the worst version of this to me, and the one I just fucking cannot stand, is the Final Fantasy VII Remake series and its version of the multiverse, which is just the absolute worst version of this, where, like, I'm sorry, I cannot make the emotional leap of caring about Aerith's theoretical death if there are an infinite number of other Aeriths out there who are in the world talking to us as another Aerith is dying. Like, oh no, okay, now you're just telling me that it does not matter if this life is one part of an infinite number of other lives in the stream, blah, 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 blah. The snake is just eating its own tail. To be clear, I don't think GQuuuuuuX is anywhere near the worst version of that I have seen, because there is at least others. Like, the Final Fantasy VII version is the worst because there's no, like, new character to hang your hat on anywhere in that. Like, it's all just the Ouroboros snake eating its own tail. But I totally understand what you're saying here, Sean, and I think, like, it is the problem where you can have, if you want to do your alternate universe story and, like, engage with that, that can be so fun. But once you do the multiverse thing, yeah, I agree with, I think you're saying it right. It just narrows the scope of the world. You know, the one thing I will say for it is I'm glad it at least is, as convoluted as it is, I'm glad that the other side of the Kirakira wasn't just literally Gundam 79 where Lala dies. Like, I'm glad it at least is divorced enough from that in my head I can very easily go, GQuuuuuuX is its own weird fucking thing over here. But it is, I agree with the idea that it shrinks the story and it makes it feel more inevitable, and it makes, like, this version of Char have to become the Char that we recognize at the end, rather than kind of getting to go off on his own path. All of those kinds of things. It becomes the Ouroboros rather than an actual branching path that goes to an unknowable future.
Yeah, and for me, like, you know, like, I don't know if I would like it more if it did the, like, or like it more or less, I guess, if it did the, like, it somehow spins off from the events of A Cosmic Glow as we know them, where Lala sacrifices herself in order for Char to live. But it is very weird to me that the whole hinge point of this multiverse stuff is this other alternate universe take on Gundam that is seemingly all the events of Gundam we know, other than in A Cosmic Glow, Char is killed instead of Lala, and so Lala's psyche is fractured, and she creates, like, these, like, infinite universes or whatever, where she's trying to find a universe where Char doesn't die. And I do find it hilarious that they present that. This is actually a thing the director talked about in that beginning movie interview thing I watched this morning, of, like, them trying to, like, how can we in a shorthand show that idea? And, like, well, we can use mobile suits. And so you just see, like, apparently what Lala did is try to find what different kind of mobile suit could Char turn red to create a universe where he lives. So it's like, what if, man, it's like, oh, Char died. How can I make it so that Char lives? What if he had a red Goof instead of red Zaku? Nope, got killed in that one. What about a red Big Zam? Nope, oh, fuck, Amuro got him in that one too. But, like, it's like all of that feels like it's so limp and meaningless and pointless to me, when the answer to that question is, Lala, you sacrifice yourself to save Char because that is what happened, because Char didn't die there. Like, if you want a universe where Char lives, that's the universe we all already know. We know how that universe is created. And this is not a version where it's like Lala is wanting to be with Char, that she wants a universe where both of them live. What we're presented is Lala wants a universe where Char lives. And it's just like, well, yeah. I watched, yeah, that's what Gundam is. Like, I mean, obviously he doesn't live forever. He gets killed eventually, but he doesn't die there. You know, he gets to live for a decent life. You know, he gets to do some cool stuff before he dies. And, like, it really feels like they had an idea for the multiverse thing, but could not figure out a way to fit all those pieces together. And so they're just sort of waving their hands really fast to try to make you not want to think about it. And this is, this is true of like most multiverse stories. This is the reason why a lot of them are bad, is that if you try to put any thought into it, it all just collapses and just feels utterly meaningless. This one feels particularly meaningless because it is both trying to bank off of your knowledge and affection and love for Gundam in order to make you care about any of this. But also, if you think about the events of Gundam, the whole structure of their multiverse just doesn't hold any potency. Because it's like, well, I already know the solution to the world where Char lives because that was never a problem. It's not solving a problem or something bad that happened in Gundam that we're trying to set right. It's like it's an alternate of an alternate. It's a copy of a copy. It's like it's so degraded. I just don't know how to hold any like how to care about it at all. And so it's like it's just such a weird way to try to do your multiverse story. Again, I don't even know. I would think it would be better if they tried to wrap all that in, which is what I kind of assumed they would do, is have the resolution be that she realizes that the way to create that universe is for her to sacrifice herself, and that creates the Gundam we know. That would also be a terrible conclusion. But it would be a terrible conclusion I could respect more than this terrible conclusion, I guess.
Yeah, I'm glad it just kind of leaves original Gundam out of it, but I do wonder if you're a Japanese fan, let's say, who has the broad cultural awareness of Gundam, because it is like Star Wars in Japan, right?
Yeah.
But you haven't actually seen Gundam 79. Would you walk away from this just assuming that Char dies in Gundam 79, right?
I think so.
You would just assume that that's the show, right? Yes. And you would go, okay, well, he dies at that point. That's the end of the series, right? And then you tell them, well, actually, no, he lives and he becomes a man named Quattro Bagina wearing cool sunglasses, and he joins the Federation forces to fight the Titans, and then he goes off on his own and restarts Zeon, and then he tries to blah, blah, blah. Like, if you told the whole story, they'd be like, wait, what? What? What are they doing? And that alone is not necessarily a problem, but the way it all plays out here, yeah. And it's again where I wonder, like, if they had more time to like articulate what they think they're doing with the multiverse, would it be better? Would it be worse? I don't know. For instance, here's a scene that I think points to both some of the fun of this show, but also some of the things that just don't work. Is in the finale, you have the big scene where Shuji's like ghost figure and Machu meet inside the Kira Kira, and you have the song Beginning by Inoue Daisuke playing from Gundam Movie 3,
yeah. And
it is where Shuji is doing the big exposition dump. And I started laughing there because it is your classic, Hideaki Anno, Studio Gainax, that cruise. We're going to talk really fast about really dense, crazy things over the song Beginning. Now, that alone is fine. But the way the song Beginning was used in Movie 3, and has been used since in other contexts, is that it has the long build-up, but when it gets into the main chorus where it swells, usually everything else goes away and we're left with pure visuals. But when Beginning swells in this show, they have to bring the volume further down because Shuji is still talking. And he talks so long that it gets through the swell, goes back to the main verse structure, swells again, and he's still talking. We never get the moment like in the Cosmic Glow section of Gundam Movie 3 where it swells and we just see the sea cascading over Amuro's mind a la 2001: A Space Odyssey. You never get to that moment because he has to talk an awful lot to a degree that I don't even, this is less than 24 hours since I watched that last episode, and I don't entirely remember everything he says, but he has to talk for a very long time to explain all of this in a way that doesn't quite connect or feel like it actually understands why and how that song was used originally.
Yes, like that section of that last episode is not good. It's just like, because it's like he's talking so fast, you get your again, my main takeaway from that was in every universe, she created a different Char red mobile suit, which is just an incredibly funny idea of specifically, it's funny that Lala is doing that. That's her way of trying to solve the problem. And then eventually she's just like, Ah, of course, a red Gundam. That's how you do it. But yes, like he talks for like 6 minutes or something, and but you like take away so little from it. It is the kind of thing where you don't really understand who that exposition is for, because if you're someone who is a fan of Gundam and knows all of this stuff already, like, you don't need all that. Like, it's fine. Like, you can explain what you need to explain in like a minute, and people are like, oh, okay. I don't know if people would like it, but you can explain what's going on. But if you're someone who doesn't know Gundam, I feel that is going to make it even more confusing, because you don't know how to filter out what is and isn't important information. Whereas if you're a Gundam fan, you're looking at that, you're like, well, most of this is not... I don't need to understand what he's saying here because it's all nonsense, but I can just I can get what your relationship is to original Gundam here. Like, yes, it's weird that it's not actually original Gundam, it's this other version of original Gundam or whatever, that where Char died, but okay. But if you're a newbie to it, I just don't know how you process this wall of words, and if you're, watching with obviously English subtitles, like text that's coming at you and processing all of that. And then, you then get some other very good Studio Khara isms of like, Shalia Bull looking at them being like, oh, it's the Omega Psycommu, and it's blah, 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 blah. Or could it be the Endymion system? And you're like, what in the fuck is the Endymion system? Like, what? Nobody's ever said that before. It's some very, like, watching End of Evangelion ass like, oh, it's the Spear of Longinus. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, I know, well, okay. I know what that is in mythology, but like, what does that have to do with fucking anything?
Well, because here's the thing. When this style of Studio Khara works, and I do think it works in places. I think it works in particularly the Shin Evangelion movies, I think it does very well. Yes. Where you will often, at the climax, have a big wall of dialogue explaining the, like, particular ways, like, the pseudoscience of which all of this is working. But why it works is because that doesn't actually matter. And what actually matters is an emotional hook with the characters that is, like, being driven at that moment. And the pseudoscience is the kind of gobbledygook getting us there. So, for instance, in Evangelion 3.0, 1.0, the final one, you do have a lot of that at the end where you have, Shinji's father talking about the way all this stuff works and the world's going to collapse, blah, blah, blah. But it works because what you're seeing is this father and son finally connecting across, like, time and space, and Shinji making that empathic leap with his dad and all of that stuff. Or at the end of the second Shin Evangelion movie, where you have a lot of, like, complicated mechanics around what is happening between Shinji's Eva and Asuka's Eva and all of that stuff. But what actually matters is that Shinji is about to do something for himself, and that you have, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name, the woman who's like his guardian, is like cheering him on. Misato is like cheering him on to do this thing. And so the emotional high is so high of that moment. And the gobbledygook is almost like an intentional distraction to make you realize how little you care about the plot and how much you care about the emotions. And I think that is a valid way of creating a story. Sometimes I think it tips the wrong way. For me and you, I know End of Eva is a place where that tips the wrong way. I would say the final 2 episodes of Evangelion, the TV show, it tips the right way, because I think there's also this stylistic thing going on there that is interesting with that. But, I think this is a place where it probably tips the wrong way, because I'm not entirely sure what Machu or Nyan want, and also I really do. The comparison between Nyan and Shin Asuka, I think, is very real for me in this one, because Nyan is in the finale at the beginning. She and Machu have a little fight, and then Machu goes on. And then you have like a solid 15 minutes where we don't see Nyan, and it cuts back to Nyan, and I went, oh, right, Nyan's still here. And I had a visceral, like, new type flashback to watching the finale of Seed Destiny, where near the end it cuts back to Sheen being sad on the moon, and I went, all right, Sheen's in this show. He was the main character at one point. Now he's sitting sad on the moon while other characters do the climax. And it's not quite one-to-one, because Nyan was never the number one on the call sheet protagonist, but there is that, like, oh, right, they forgot about her, didn't they? And when you cut back and she's still, I guess, just where we left her, it feels weird.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like, it's weird that they went to the effort to set up this whole love triangle thing, and that, like, motivates why Machu gets weird at the midpoint of the show, and then all this, and then also why Nyan goes kind of crazy and all this shit. And then when it comes time to resolve that love triangle stuff with Ghost Shuji, Amuro, Ghost Gundam, blah, 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 whatever, she's just like nowhere to be seen. And yes, like I definitely had the same Asuka Sheen thing of like, oh yeah, right, yes, she's in the show still. like she's technically here. One thing with Nyan, just like on that note, I thought was very funny is I guess that is literally her name. I guess her name is just Nyan. Because like I believe we talked about in the beginning podcast that my assumption was that was a like fake name. In that scene, it looks like she comes up with a fake name, and Nyan is of course the Japanese onomatopoeia for a cat's meow, and so it's like having a character to show called Meow. And it's very funny whenever people yell her name or whatever, because they're just going meow, and I just kept on waiting to learn what her actual name is, and I guess it's just Nyan. I don't know. But it's like she is definitely just a character that feels like very kind of residual by the time you get to the last episode of this show.
I would absolutely watch the entire English dub of this show if they had just called her Meow and had all the English actors shouting meow. That would have been because that would actually be an accurate translation of if. Yes. Now, usually you wouldn't do that with proper nouns, but still, it would be accurate, and that would be very funny. No, I don't. To be clear, I don't think you do either. I don't think that impacts the quality of this show or anything. No. The fact that I don't weird. Need her to have a name. It's just funny. Because Machu, we're calling her Machu. Her name is Amate, but she's almost never called that. Machu is like her name as a kid that she uses in the clan battles, all of that stuff. Yeah. And then Shuji has a real name. He doesn't get a fun. I guess he does have his weird name that they call him a couple times in the clan battles, but I don't remember what it is. It's like Hera Hasamichi or something.
Hara Heramushi, where it's like a hungry bug, like hungry caterpillar is what he's basically called.
In the dub, they could have called him the very hungry caterpillar. Would have been.
I think that's why. I think that is why it's. I literally think it's that reference. Like that is what they are calling him on purpose. I think it is supposed to be that exact reference.
That's fantastic. Anyway, yeah. Okay, so. Yeah, and again, like, I'm of two minds, because I think some of the stuff in those last 4 episodes, where you get all of the crazy exposition and whatnot, I think can work well in terms of, as in the end of most of the Tomino shows, just a lot coming at you very fast. Like, I think every time you cut to Chalia Bull, I like what's going on with him, and how many crazy things are happening, and he's having to, he was going to assassinate both Kycelia and Giranzabi, and then, Kycelia beat him to the punch, and now he's having to fight his own guys. Like, all of that stuff feels like, if Tomino made a Chalia Bull show, this is how that climax would be going, and I'm super into that. I do think it is like the emotional thread with the 3 main characters that is a problem. And then the other thing I want to mention, and I want to see how you felt about this too, Sean. I do think we mentioned earlier taking these 2 main characters, Nyan and Machu, who feel kind of queer-coded, and then they're very heteronormatively into this boy who we know nothing about, so we can only assume they're into him because he's kind of cute. And then also the end of the show and all the multiverse stuff hinging on a dynamic that isn't even in Original Gundam, of Lala being so mind-broken by the loss of Char that she's creating infinite universes. You combine all that together, and it does feel like, for a franchise that usually does really well by its female characters, it feels very reductive in its treatment of gender and gender dynamics, to me.
Yes. Especially when you're coming off of Witch from Mercury with Sleda in Miorine. It definitely it feels rough, and yeah, I do think that is one of the things with the way they use Lala just feels weird. Like it just, I think you can say that some of it is, well, this is an alternate universe Lala soon, but it doesn't read as this is what Lala's reaction would be if Char was killed, because it kind of just takes you out of the context of that is her also being torn in this, her very, real world material connection with Char and her new type connection with Amuro, and this kind of, physical relationship she has with Char, the spiritual connection she's developed with Amuro. Part of this is that they have kind of, recontextualized Char as being much more of a new type than he was contextualized originally. I think Char, it has that new type potential, but he can never really realize it is what the Char characterization always felt like, and that's part of that dynamic from the original show with Lala. And there is something really weird about them kind of crushing that down into this Char gets killed, Lala goes crazy and creates infinite universes where Char can live. It just doesn't quite read right. And yeah, when you juxtapose that with the way they kind of just like squash their two female main characters, one of them, Nyan, basically into non-existence at the end of the show in order to create this kind of very flimsy pseudo-romance thing with Shuji. Yeah, like it definitely just like feels wrong. It just feels wholly undeveloped. It feels like it's just not doing well by its own characters. And then by extension kind of like using original Gundam in a weird way to reinforce that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there's a couple of places where I also think it flattens original Gundam in its attempt to do this, like with the Lala character, where that's not my read on Lala in Gundam 79, that her mind would be broken by the loss. I say she would be sad, obviously, but I think she would be sad in the same way Amuro is sad when he kills Lala. Yeah. Amuro isn't broken by that. He does still move on and do stuff, and I can't really imagine this show making that move with a male character. That's why it feels wrong to me in a gender dynamic. But then it's exactly what you're saying. With Char is more of a new type. Well, that's never really been my read on Char. There's also, I found this kind of shocking coming from this crew. There's a moment where Kaecelia just flat out says that they killed Char's dad, Zeon Zum Daikun, and it's very clear that they killed Zeon. And that also is something that every other incarnation of Gundam is pretty careful to leave vague, of whether they actually killed Zeon or if Zeon died of unrelated causes and the Papa Zabi, what's his, I'm sorry.
Degwin
Zabi. Degwin Zabi was just an opportunist who took the chance. Something like the Gundam The Origin actually goes pretty far with in making it very clear that Char is much more upset about what they did to his mom than what they potentially did to his dad. Because what they did to his mom, he knows, and what they did to his dad, he doesn't. And this show just flat out saying they killed Zeon Zum Daikun, that felt oh, that's a little weird coming from this crew, because I would feel like they would have a more ambiguous read on it than that.
Yes, I'm with you. That part's weird. They also have that very strange moment with Kaecelia where she's it's this weird reverse of Char at the end of Char's character talk. It's I could have been his mom. It's a really weird thing to do with, if we're talking about gendered stuff. It's not a really weird thing to do with Kaecelia Zabi. It kind of, the Kaecelia and Char's relationship is so, kind of undeveloped in original Gundam, right? It's expanded in the movie version and stuff a little bit, but it feels like a huge leap in a weird way that kind of quashes down this really cool badass lady from that show into this if only I could have pretty blonde boys, then I would be a mom. Is no. Okay.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Sean, because I'd honestly kind of blocked that out because I really didn't like that moment, because Kaecelia is the last character in the history of fiction who would have maternal instincts. I'm sorry. Yes. That includes all men. You'd have all men listed with maternal instincts before you would get to Kaecelia Zabi. And it's not even because she is masculinized, which she is in some ways, and in some ways she's not at all. She doesn't have love. Maternal instincts rely on some kind of love. The most love she ever displays is being mad at Girin about killing Degwin, right? Yeah. But, I don't even read that so much as she loves Degwin as, nah, that's the code. You don't kill your dad. You fucking, it's a rules thing for her almost, right? There's...
And it's also, it's an excuse for her to be able to do her coup as well.
Yes,
I think she legitimately is that's pretty... that's a line that I think Kaecelia probably would not cross because she wouldn't need to, because she can have enough power even if Degwin was there. But also it's just a good political excuse for her to do her coup and kill Girin. And I think they do that in this show as well. I think that's fine. But yes, the Castle Boya. I could have been your mom.
It's a weird move. Don't really love that. Yeah. And again, it's not as bad as some of the gender dynamics in End of Evangelion that I think goes up to the line of violent misogyny. But it's enough that it creates a pattern where I'm I just don't think you would be using the male characters in this way at any point in this kind of iconography. Like, would you have told... Because you could have told this story with, like, take Char out of the equation, and you could have done a multiverse thing where it's not the Elmeth at the center of the universe, it's the original RX-78 Gundam, and it's Amuro stuck in there trying to find ways where Lala lived. But I don't think they would do that because Amuro is a man. And that's the problem, right?
And honestly, that would have been a better thing than what they did. Like, the thing that, you know, that I thought it was going to go into, that I was like, oh, this would be kind of interesting, as I thought the Lala stuff for the Rose of Sharon was going to be a misdirection, in that it was going to be the Saikamu from Char's counterattack that creates the Axis shock, which to me would make more sense. It would be like a way of, like, if you want to hitch this to something where you can say, like, here's one of the infinite possibilities created by this pivotal moment, that would be something that I could see that thing echoing across a multiverse or something in a way that you could do that would give you space for stuff that, like, the Lala stuff, just, like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't attach to her characterization in a way that reads well to me. Yeah, like, it's the way they decided to use that as the kernel for their multiverse stuff is just very strange.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this is, you know, I find this a very useful conversation so far, Sean, because I will continue to say, I think this is an entertaining show. It's well made. Yes. It's fun to watch, all of that stuff. But I did definitely end with, like, a certain feeling of emptiness, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. And I was very glad you and I were going to be podcasting the next day, because I don't think I was ever going to quite work out my feelings on it without talking through it. And I think this is clarifying to me what doesn't really work.
Yeah, and again, like, for me, it's the... I want to, like, again, express that for me, it's like, it just feels disappointing because those other things are so good, because the production values are so good, because the kernels of the characters that are there are so cool and interesting, and so many of the broad ideas for those new characters are so well done. And, you know, and you said earlier some of that stuff of, like, Shalia Bull's role in the finale stuff is awesome, partially because it gets to live in the alt history version of the story and not the multiverse story, because he's still operating on, we got to kill the zombies. I love the idea that, like, he actually is trying to find Char because he needs to kill Char because he wants Artesia/Sayla to be the one who leads. Like, that's a cool alt history Gundam idea that I would love to see the show that just has Machu and Yan and all their, and you know, their role in that. And, like, how do they come up with that, with Nyan ending up on the Zeon side with Kycilia, with Machu being with Shalia Bull, right? That another place where it feels like they skip, like, 5 episodes is between episodes 9 and 10, where Machu comes back from training with Shalia Bull, and there's, like, some flashback she has to things Shalia Bull tells her. I'm like, well, you know, if you think that the Machu non-relationship is undeveloped, the fucking Machu Shalia Bull relationship is effectively non-existent, and yet, like, it feels like a relationship that would be really important to a theoretical second season of GQuuuuuuX that is set with her as a part of the crew on that ship while Nyan is with Kycilia. And, like, when you're F91 imagining, like, that show, God, that show would be fucking awesome. And Shalia Bull still gets to live in that show all the way up basically to the end. But unfortunately, that's not where like the focus is once you get into those last 3 or 4 episodes.
You're totally right. And this is what we were saying earlier. Like, when it is engaged in its alternate history of just, like, here's the change we made, Char got into the Gundam, no Amuro, go from there. The show is consistently very good at that. Like, the Hideaki Anno thing that is between episodes 2 and 8 is a really fun version of that thing. It's a very fan-servicey, but it is, like, a really thought-through version of that alt history. All of the Shalia Bull stuff, I completely agree. Like, the whole idea as you come to see that, one, he is still a total fucking weirdo. Like, I do still love that the weirdos come from Jupiter thing. Like, maybe my favorite scene in this show is when you get the scene of him narrating his journey to Jupiter, and they do it in the sketchy, still image, black and white. That is so... where, like, I feel like I was worried when it started of, like, oh, I don't actually want them to reveal what happened at Jupiter because it's such a great mystery, but they kind of don't reveal, and they leave it in, like, the visuals are just this sketchy black and white, and then what happened is that we almost all died and then we didn't, and I don't know what happened. And like, you understand how it drove Shalia Bull a little bit crazy. And then you find out that he has come back with this. He's basically become this world's Char Aznable, but a little calmer, where he is also running this crazy double, triple agent scheme to try to get rid of the Zabi family, install Artesia, and try to uplift new types without destroying life on Earth. And he's trying to, like, thread that needle. I love all of that. And then, like, his ending is great, where he's like, if you're gonna kill me and put me in front of a tribunal, that's fine, Xavier. I was prepared to die. And Xavier's like, oh, fuck you, Shalia. No, you are living in this world and you're gonna make it work. And Shalia's like, you can tell he's a little deflated because he just planned to die. He had not thought past this point. And I love that. And, like, here's the thing. I know Studio Khara has said they're not interested in this, but this show was a hit. If they wanted to do a season 2, now that the multiverse shit is done, I feel like you could do a really cool, like, second season where, like, Artesia is in charge. Maybe we get to know this version of Sayla, where Shalia Bull is the main character. Maybe you have, like, they have Bask Ohm in here for one episode, and that was very fun. Like, maybe you have some version of the Titans are the threat, and you're able to, like, now that all of the multiversal stuff is done, you could just tell a story in this world. I still would love that, because I think this version of the world is very rich, and I think these characters are still very rich. And now that Shuji and all of that is gone, maybe there's a cool story you could tell. I would be into that, because that side of it consistently works for me really, really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, or just like a GQuuuuuuX Redux where, like, oh, well, the multiverse has been resolved and that fucked with time. That means that the multiverse stuff never happened. You just get Machi's adventures, you know, just do it over from the start.
Yeah. No, but yes, Shalia Bull rocks. That actor is Kawada Shinji, who does such a good job with that character. Also, the character design, all of that. I love how Shalia Bull's character design is very clearly a mix of Gundam 79 design language and the Pokemon design language, and so he just straddles that line the way he kind of does in the narrative. I think is very cool. Another couple actors I did want to shout out while we're talking about that, Sean, is the actor who plays Char in the in our the main universe here, because you do have a Shuichi Ikeda cameo at the end, but the one in this show is that actor Shin Yuki, and we said when we watched the beginning movie that his performance was interesting because he was doing Char without doing like a clear impression. I thought he got better as the show went. I thought those last couple episodes, he got some more Char-isms, but he also got to play some notes very differently than Char would play. And I thought he was really good by the end of this, and I was impressed with that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, like that performance is phenomenal. I do really like the, like, whole thing of Char has been charring it up. You know, he is like yet another different identity as like a weird scientist guy who's built the entire demon cannon Technova blah 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 shit. That's fun.
And now he's just covering his eyes with his bangs, just finding another way to do that. I know, I enjoyed that. We didn't get to talk about her a lot with the movie, but the actress who does Kaecelia in this show, Nazuka Kaori, I thought she was fantastic. Like, Kaecelia is a tough character to get right, and I thought she, like, nailed that. Kaecelia is one of the best parts of this show.
Yes, it's a really, really good version of that character, you know, again, barring that weird Castle Boya, if I could have been your mom sequence. Yes. And one of my favorite scenes with her is also you get a shockingly brief appearance of Giran Zabi, given that they did cast Yamadera Koichi, you know, like one of the biggest voice actors in Japan, who got one of his earliest roles is on Gundam, though, because he's Gyune, one of the other pilots on Char's side, Char's counterattack. We, of course, would also know him as, like, Beerus from Dragon Ball Super, Kaji Doji from Neon Genesis Evangelion, but he's in, like, fucking everything. He's amazing. He's the Giran in this, and I do love that scene where they're all talking about, like, her mask and all this shit, and then, like, everyone slowly starts choking to death on this poison, and you see her step out and she pulls the mask down and has that little, like, airtight thing around her mouth, and she's just, it's like the best fucking, like, the most Kaecelia ass assassination ever. It's a really great scene that I think, especially because they got someone who is so prominent, like Yamadera Koichi, like, everyone knows his voice for Giran Zabi. You think that he's going to be a bigger component of the ending of the show, and having him just be offed in the scene he's introduced, I thought was a pretty great move.
Oh, that's one of the best scenes. And again, in that tradition of all of the alternate universe stuff is great.
Yeah.
And that scene absolutely fits the bill. And I completely agree with you that I think they probably cast Yamadera because you hear him and you go, Giran's going to be in the rest of this show. That's why you get Yamadera Koichi, right? Nope, that motherfucker is dead, and I love it. No, all the recasts are really good, and they're very consistent. None of the characters are voiced by existing Gundam voices. You do, in the finale, have brief cameos. You have Ikeda Shuichi doing Char from the other world. You have Furuya Toru doing a brief line as Amuro, as the spirit of the GQuuuuuuX, kind of. And then you do have Han Keiko as original Lala Soon. And that is interesting because she has not voiced Lala since Char's counterattack. So that was interesting to hear Han Keiko, who is still alive and kicking. And I enjoyed hearing all three of those, but that's purely the, Gundam fanboy in me.
Yeah. Well, and I think I like their idea, even if it is weird because, again, it's not actually the Gundam universe we know because it still has this very critical difference that Char dies there. But I like the idea of you get those original voices from that stuff. Obviously, the Amuro stuff is more spiritual, whatever. Like, I feel like that's tied into... I assume they have some bigger idea of Shuji as some sort of, like, multiversal Amuro, this character that has to kill Lala Soon over and over again. Like, that feels like what they're suggesting. It's a totally undeveloped idea, but, like, I feel like that's what it is, and or he's possessed by the spirit of the Gundam, which is Amuro, whatever the fuck it is, right? But you have the Amuro voice, and then you do also have that Lala Soon voice at the very end, which is the Lala from that universe who has been pulled into the GQuuuuuuX universe, wakes up for a brief second, and says, like, thank you or whatever. But it is cool to have those voices back. One thing that amused me, Jonathan, just on the notes thing, is I finished watching that episode, and I was like, I gotta look at the credits to see if it, like, especially for Han Keiko, it's one line, I'm like, is that her? Was it Han Megumi, her daughter, who has done that before? Or she's been like Sayla in Gundam The Origin, but she can sound exactly like her mom if she wants to. And I was like looking at the credits, and so I was like, yes, it is her. And then I rushed to go to my notes, and then I went to add it to the notes, and you had already added it, like literally like 10 minutes before I was going to put it in, because we probably watched these episodes at almost the exact same time. But it did
and that was Sean. That was exactly it. I was watching those credits eagle-eyed, waiting to see, particularly Shuichi Keida's like name. I'm very used to seeing in kanji, and then like the others, I had double checked the kanji for because I'm like, I want to see if they're there, and they were all there because what they are, they're in a line at the very bottom without character names credited, so it's just the three of them at the end. And I was so excited, and I went and added it to the notes, and I'm amused that you had the same thought.
Yes, it was specifically Han Keiko, because I'm like, I can't tell exactly who that is. And yes, it's cool that they brought her back effectively out of retirement, just obviously to do a little line, but very cool. But yes, it is a little weird because it's not the Gundam universe, but it's the multiverse stuff. But I like the gimmick of the GQuuuuuuX universe. This is what those people sound like, and then in Gundam Ask Gundam, of course, it's the people that you know.
Yes, the one funny thing of that is that you have this whole show where Char does sound, again, like a very young man in this universe because they have done a recast. And then when you hear him at the end of episode 12, it's present day, like 80-year-old Ikeda Shuichi. And I was just suddenly like, oh, Char is way older in that universe, huh? Yes. And I don't care. That's awesome. That's fun. Goku is a 90-year-old woman. It's great. Anime is fun. But it was just a funny moment for me.
Yes, absolutely. But I also like, again, like their commitment and all that stuff to do the like hand-drawn mobile suits, and or again, for some of those more complicated shots, particularly when the Gundam comes over, they do a CG version, but they're clearly trying to make it look hand-drawn as much as they can. And I love the like commitment to the bit is very admirable.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see. I had a lore question for you, Sean.
Okay.
Is the witch character Shika Sugai in episode 4 supposed to be anyone, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think she's just an original character. I think it's like that kind of like, it's one of the things I think is interesting is you do have some of your like former Xeon ace pilots, particularly in like, not necessarily in Tomino Gundam stuff, but more in the like expanded Gundam MSV, Johnny Ridden, all this shit where you've got like just like a who's who of random ex-Xeon Ace pilots that get involved in the manga stories and all that kind of shit. That I feel like that's like in this universe, that position is held by ex-Federation aces who never got their like ultimate day of glory because they lost the war. And I think that's what that character is supposed to kind of represent.
Because that character is drawn like the other original GQuuuuuuX characters with the very Pokemon-esque design, but she's drawn in such a way that it almost looked to me like a Pokemonified version of Mirai Yashima. And before they said her name, I'm like, oh, is that the game they're playing? Because Mirai has and it wasn't. And I'm more happy that they weren't playing that game constantly, because there are some cameos from other Gundam characters like Gates Kappa, which was a deep cut. But no, I'm not. It's just the character design felt enough like a nod to something that I was curious if, like, is there a fan theory I'm unaware of? But yeah, I'm happy for it not to be.
Yeah, and I really like that character. That's my favorite episode, is episode 4. Like, I like that, just like, it just gets to be its own thing. I think that character's story of being this, like, totally unassuming lady who's, like, this wife and mother of this young boy, you know, that then you realize, like, oh, she is, like, this sort of, like, you know, ex-ace pilot who's, like, maybe sort of a you know, a budding new type, or, like, a new type on the weaker end of things, who's killed, like, 100 people or whatever in the war. And she just can't let that go, right? She can't really leave it behind. And she ultimately gets killed in this battle. And, you know, she has like that last vision of her son who she left behind and all this stuff. Like it's like a really well done one episode character for like this kind of like one-off fight. That episode also, I think, has the best battle, and it has like the best guest star behind the scenes, because the director of that episode, so most of these episodes, the production staff are primarily Studio Khara people in terms of the director's storyboard stuff, and then every once in a while they'll pull in someone who worked on Witch from Mercury, usually a younger person who worked on Witch from Mercury. So there's a lot of the episodes directed from from Mercury people. Episode 4, though, is directed by Araki Tetsuro, who is the director of Death Note. More notably for this, though, he is the director for the Studio Wit seasons of Attack on Titan, the first 3 seasons of that show. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they got the one where the whole gimmick is that she shoots wires out and sticks them into any mobile suits to spin around them. And they got the fucking Attack on Titan guy to direct that episode, and that the action fucking rules. And that idea is so cool. And the ending of that, where she's like coming around again and she's got one last wire and it rips the arm off of her Gundam, but in that whole process Shuji has already gone around behind her and just slowly comes out of the shadows and stabs her in the back, and you're like, that's fucking fucked up, bro. Like, I was so into that episode. I was like, this show is incredible. What a great single episode of this show. A little weird that they jumped, because I definitely felt the like weird jump from episode 3 to 4, but I thought like that episode kicked ass, and then immediately I was like, uh-oh, this show is not really a show of those episodes. That episode is kind of like a unique one in the mix of what GQuuuuuuX is doing, but that episode does fucking rule.
I agree completely. Araki Tetsuro is one of my favorite anime directors. I think like the best thing about Death Note is how he directs that anime. It is like directorially a fucking masterpiece. I love the style of that show. And Attack on Titan also. Like Attack on Titan, the Wit Studio seasons like visibly have fewer material resources than the Mappa seasons, but I do think they're notably better for how they are directed. Like, I just think the vision of how the Wit seasons are done under Tetsuro Araki are a pretty, to me, big step up from how Mappa did it, and I like the Mappa stuff fine, but like he's a really unique director who does things really cool. And I agree, the fact that they basically have the, you know, maneuvering gear but on a Gundam is a cool idea, and I like it.
Yeah, and I just really want to know the backstory of the production of that episode, because it's just so hilarious to me. Like, at what point did all that stuff come together? Like, because it just feels like it can't possibly be a coincidence, because it's so, like, it's such an aberrant credit within the show. Because, again, almost every other person working on the show is either a longtime Studio Khara person, or they are someone who is a, like, someone who mostly works with Sunrise that specifically did stuff on Witch from Mercury. There is one other name that
he's also just a second. I also want to say he's also the only like guest director who storyboarded, because he's half storyboarded that episode. And if you look at the other Witch from Mercury vets, like Ito Shinosuke and some of the others, they do not storyboard their episodes. Yes. So that also, I feel like he had more authorship of that one than the other guest directors did.
Yes. So it is like episode 4 is just kind of like an interesting episode production-wise there. The other name that I was like very pleased and kind of surprised to see pop up, because it was a name that like I was looking at the credits on the Japanese side of things, and like, I recognize that fucking name. I've read that name over and over again, but I couldn't quite place it. And then I was like, looked it up, and it's in episode 9, The Rose of Sharon. This is the Machi Goes to Earth episode. Those storyboards are by Tsurumaki Kazuya, because he did storyboards for everything, but also Sawa Shinpei is the other credited storyboard artist. Sawa Shinpei is one of like the fucking KyoAni guys going back. He started on K-On! As an animator, but he was at KyoAni all the way through Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid S. Like, he did a bunch of episodes and stuff, so we talked about Sawa Shinpei.
We've said that name a lot. many times on Japanimation Station.
Yes, but kind of in keeping with a trend with a lot of the other people on the show, one of the main things he did after leaving KyoAni in 2021 is he did animation and a lot of animation direction work on Witch from Mercury. He also notably did animation for Yamada Naoko's Kimi no Ito, the movie. So he animated for that as well. But so he is someone from Witch from Mercury, but unlike most of the Witch from Mercury people, he's got a much bigger career, right? Most of those Witch from Mercury people have like, been in the industry maybe like 5 to 10 years. Sawa Shinpei obviously been in the industry for over 20 at this point. So it's like he's, it's a big name. But I was just very pleased to see that name pop up kind of out of nowhere from our Kyoto vacation. So it was a little bit of a blast from the past.
Yes, absolutely. One other person working on this show that I just want to shout out, I know we talked about her on the movie, but just deserves another shout out, Kugimiya Rie, who does Haro and is also Machu's mother, but is more notably Haro. Kugimiya needs to be the official voice of Haro going forward. She is the best fucking Haro. It's so good. I mean, it's Kugimiya Rie. She's always great. But, like, there's just this Haro is one of the best Haros we've had in a long time. I love this Haro's personality. She still sounds like Haro. She's not doing something totally different with it. But I think we need to bring Kugimiya into the Sunrise fold and make her the official mascot and the voice of Haro, because it's just a match made in heaven. I'm amazed she's never voiced Haro before.
Yes, it is a great Haro. And it's funny because I assumed that she was, when we watched the movie, I assumed that she was voicing Haro because she was the voice actress playing Machu's mom. And I assumed that Machu's mom was going to be a bigger character later in the show, because that's a super common thing for like characters like Haro, or when you have like animals that obviously need like an actor to go or whatever for the animal. Usually it's someone who's a regular on the show that then also is doing that voice. But I feel like it's the reverse. I assume they cast her for Haro as like, well, no, he's playing Machu's mom. Do you want to do Machu's mom? And she's like, sure, or something, because it is like Haro is by far more prominent. I do think it's weird that they never like I felt like there should have been something explaining exactly what the fuck is the deal with this Haro that seems like omniscient or something, like its ability to like interface with the Alpha Psi Commu and all this stuff. Like, it's so active and it feels so. I remember us talking about with the movie of like, what was the deal with this Haro? Is it the original Haro from Amuro, and that's how it's able to do the Psi Commu stuff? Like, what's going on here? And there's just nothing. Like, it's never brought up even, like, let alone, like, it never acknowledges it as being like a mystery, even though it does feel very conspicuous that this Haro is like weirdly powerful in that sense. But either way, though, the performance is fucking awesome, and it is a very welcome addition to a long history of very good Haros.
Absolutely. So, Kugimiya, welcome to the Gundam family. I'm surprised you weren't here before. But anyway, what else do we have to say about GQuuuuuuX? Great title. I just want to continue to again say that honestly, maybe my greatest source of joy with this show is every time I looked something up with it, just typing in those 6 U's over and over. Just GQuuuuuuX. I always had fun with it. It's so good.
On the fucking thing I talked about, where that live stream where Kudasada Tomio, the actress who played Machu, and the guy who plays Charlie and Bull did the like live commentary on the first episode. At the end of that, after they did all their promotional stuff, they had to do the like, and if you want to send in questions for the next time we do this, send in questions to GQuuuuuuX at whatever, and they had to just like, and it's 6 U's, like the way they had to really try to emphasize that. Like, what a nightmarish fucking email address to try to market. you know there's some marketing motherfucker at Sunrise who was pissed the fuck off when they named this show GQuuuuuuX with 6 U's. You're like, god damn it. It's like, what do I do for like, if we want to do sweepstakes for fans on like our official Twitter or something? Like, how the fuck do you make hashtags or whatever with this show? It's fucking madness.
It's genuinely one of the best things about the show. So yeah, you know, again, I wish the story came together more. I really wish Nyan and Machu got to be more fully themselves as characters and in their relationship. I wish the ending didn't rely on so much multiversal bullshit, but I enjoy the style. I love the vibes. I love the animation. The action scenes in this are fucking great. Like, they're so speedy and impactful and, like, imaginative, just consistently excellent. And if they announced a season 2 and we just got to have a season 2 where it was these characters in this world with none of the multiverse bullshit, I would be over the moon. I would have a lot of fun with that. That would be great. But for now, this is, you know, not lower tier Gundam. This is not Gundam Build Divers or anything like that.
No. But
this is middle tier Gundam, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard show to like rate in that way because it's got so much incredible stuff about it that's so superlative, but then where it falls flat is in a couple of such critical places that it just becomes it's confusing to try to like reckon with your own feelings on the show. It's kind of what you're saying earlier about like it's a show you need to podcast about to like try to settle yourself on it. One thing I forgot to mention, I'm looking at my notes and scrolled to the top and realized I put a screenshot here for a reason. My favorite alt history thing in this whole show is, of course, in episode 5, where you've got the Black Tri-Stars come in to do their duel, but it's not the Black Tri-Stars anymore. It's just the Black 2 Stars, I guess, because it's only Gaia and Ortega, because you find out that MASH, one of the Black Tri-Stars, the Rick Dom guys who attack Amuro in the original show, he became a mayor of some town. It was like they're reading an article exposing an affair he had with his secretary, and it's just fucking MASH with the big fucking like scar across his eye with this like lady whose eyes are blacked out. And it's like, what an incredible idea. Unfortunately, Gaia and Ortega get very unceremoniously murdered by Nyan later in that episode in one of the places where they don't ever like reckon with the fact that she just kills 2 people out of nowhere. But it is, of all the returning characters, that is by far the best thing they ever did was to have Gaia and Ortega complain about MASH, who became a fucking mayor of a town. Is just absolutely insane, and I love it.
I loved it too. I really like the use of the Black Tri-Stars in this, and it's the 2 of them, and yeah, all of that is very fun. One other thing we did not mention, Sean, looking forward towards the future, is that after GQuuuuuuX finished airing, Sunrise did announce what the next Gundam thing we're going to see is, and that is the sequel to Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway's Flash, Movie 2, which is titled Circe no Majo, or the Witch of Circe, or as they are calling it in English, The Sorcery of Nymph Circe. For whatever reason, whatever you want to call it, they are releasing it this winter. There is a 30-second trailer for it, and it is the entire returning cast and crew from the first movie, so none of that has happened. This movie was delayed for a bunch of different reasons. Part of it, like behind the scenes, we know is a lot of this crew got pulled onto Witch from Mercury to help with the animation on that and things like that. And also Gundam has just had, again, a tremendously busy decade. But one of the best things from this decade in Gundam is the first Hathaway movie, and I am very, very happy that this franchise, that this trilogy was not put on ice and that we are going to get this second movie, because, by God, I've been excited for it.
Yes, yeah, I'm also tremendously excited. It was fun to just have that news just kind of get dropped seemingly out of nowhere, because, yes, it's been a thing I think every Gundam fan has been hotly anticipating for a long time. And it just, they went dark for a very long time, but finally they're coming out into the light, and we will get our second Hathaway movie, which is titled some variation of something to do with Kirki / Circe from the Odyssey. I don't know. I'll go with the Witch Kirky would probably be what I would have titled it. But they could call it the Sorcery of Nymph Circe if they want to. That's they could do it. It's their movie.
Yeah, I don't know why we need the word nymph in there. I mean, I know that is kind of what she is, but it's also the name of one of the mobile suits, I believe, in the Hathaway universe. So, whatever. I will watch it. I will watch the hell out of it. Please don't give it to Netflix again. Their streaming compression is awful. Anyway, we will find out. I hope Hathaway Movie 1 got that Netflix release. I really hope this one gets an actual theatrical release. Like, give that one to G-Kids again. G-Kids handled the GQuuuuuuX beginning, and they did a great job because it was in IMAX and everything. I want to see Hathaway Movie 2 in IMAX. I want to hear that fucking music with the big speakers. It's going to be fun. But, it does not look like Gundam's big decade is slowing down anytime soon, and I am happy about that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I'm sure, Jonathan, without a doubt, because of all this Gundam going on, we will definitely be here next week on Weekly Suit Gundam, because it is a weekly show.
「それで自分に言い聞かせ続け